Again, we are continuing through mid-August with our webinars. Very excited that next week we have a brand new talk on electron microscopy for biological materials by Dr. Kristen Flatt, including cryo-electron microscopy. Today, I'm very happy to introduce our speaker, Dr. Muhammad Ali. He earned his PhD degree in materials chemistry from University of Queensland, Australia, in 2015. He moved to the University of Illinois to work as a postdoc in Professor Paul Brown's group. Since 2019, he has been working as a staff in the MRL. He has received his master's degrees in advanced materials engineering from Kookmin University, South Korea, and his bachelor's degree in chemistry from University of Dhaka, Bangladesh. So you can see that Mohammed's experience has been spanned across different parts of the world. He has a strong background, soft materials, polymer characterizations, and presentations in many top-level conferences in MRS, SPI, Gordon Research Conference, and so on. At this point, Mohammed is actually involved in supporting 3 of our instrumentation cores in MRL. One is actually the X-ray analysis. The other one is surface analysis due to his expertise in XPS. And the other one is in our Center of Excellence for Soft Materials due to his experience and expertise in polymer characterization, polymer materials, and so on. So with that, very pleased to have Mohammed here. Mohammed, thank you very much for taking the time and making this presentation on this very, very important technique. Again, we'll take care of your questions to the audience in the end if you post them in the chat box there. Mohammed, thank you again. And with that, I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mauro, for the kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for spending time during the lunchtime and learning in X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, that is XRF. So in this presentation, I will cover the basics of XRF, and I will also shortly introduce the type of result can be obtained using this technique. And goal of this talk is to prepare to understand the XRF data and potential artifact that should be aware of. Okay, so what is XRF? So XRF is an analytical technique to obtain elemental information from a materials. So there are several features of XRF. So this is a non-destructive, rapid, and accurate measurement, and sample require minimal to no preparation. And sample can be in solid, liquid, or powder. That means it covers all types of materials. So whatever materials you present to the spectroscopy, you will get the data. And with some assumption, we can also calculate the thickness and composition of layer structure. And I will go through part by part throughout my presentation. And this, so you may have seen this kind of chart in our previous webinar. So this is very popular chart to see the lateral resolution with the atomic precision or different techniques. So XRF actually lie in this area, occupying this area. So the detection limit for XRF, it can be up to 1 ppm level. And some other techniques can go beyond 1 ppm, such as SIMS or ICP or AAS, but all these techniques are destructive. And also, like XRF is a bulk technique, and sample area of interest could be from 1 millimeter to 1 centimeter in diameter. Okay, so this technique has been very popular in archaeology field since the last few decades. One of the example here is a dead body was found in 1991 in Europe by 2 German tourists. And with this dead body, they also found a copper axe with wooden handle. And scientists analyzed this copper head using XRF, and they found it contains 99.7% copper and few arsenic and few silver. In addition to that, they also analyzed his hair sample that also contains some copper, and from this observation, they conclude that this person may live in copper age and may work in copper industry. Another example of XRF is restoring cultural asset. Sometimes the picture you look, it consists of different pigment. Even though pigment sometimes looks very similar, but they may contain a different element. Since XRF is a non-destructive technique, we can easily utilize XRF without damaging the cultural asset, and we can identify what type of element consists of this painting. And from the result, we can easily reproduce similar types of material, so we can preserve the cultural asset. So with that time, XRF has been improved a lot, and nowadays it is very popular techniques across many industry and in many different applications, such as in oil industry, polymeric industries, chemicals, glass, or food industry, and it is heavily used to in the quality control to identify the elements as well as any impurity in the material. Okay, so what are X-ray? So X-ray basically the electromagnetic wave and the wavelength of the X-ray in between the ultraviolet ray and the gamma ray. And you can see the wavelength is from 0.01 to 10 nanometer, and the corresponding energy for X-ray is 0.125 to 125 kilo electronic volt. And X-ray shows dual characteristic, so that is a wave-like nature and as well as particle-like nature. So sometimes in my talk, I will use photon instead of a wave. Okay, so how do X-ray interact with matter? So if we expose some matter in the X-ray, some X-ray will absorb by this matter and some X-ray penetrate through it. And from this absorption, this matter also generate secondary X-ray. So that is the fluorescence X-ray. And this fluorescent X-ray basically the characteristic of this material. And from this fluorescent X-ray, we can actually identify the element consist of this material. Okay, so here there's some different event can be happened during the interaction with X-ray and any type of material. So first one, X-ray can transmit it through the materials. In that case, it is unaffected and there is no interaction happen with this material. Therefore, the incident photon energy equals to the transmitted photon energy. And this phenomena used in medical technology, also in security purpose to scanning any scanning any body or any material. Okay, so second type interaction could be it's like a photoelectric absorption. So in this case, X-ray actually knock out one electron from the inner shell, and then the outer shell electron actually fill up this inner shell hole and producing fluorescence X-ray. And this fluorescent X-ray basically the characteristic of the material, and we could get the elemental information from this X-ray. And in this talk, basically we are interested in this phenomena. And next type of interaction is X-ray could scatter by strongly bound inner shell electron. this phenomenon is called relay scattering, and this is used in the XRD. And in this case, the energy of the incident photon and the energy of the scattered photon will be the same. And next phenomena also scattered by electron, but in this case, the electron was outer shell and loosely bound. So what happened once it strike the electron, it actually eject the electron from the shell, and this X-ray also lose some energy. So the scattered energy actually is slightly lower than the initial incident photon energy. And this scattering called quantum scattering, and also inelastic collision or inelastic scattering. And to be noted that all these phenomena will observe in the XRF spectrum. So it is important to understand all these phenomena. Okay. So there are basically two groups of spectroscopy system for XRF. So one is energy dispersive XRF, and another is wavelength dispersive XRF. So difference between these two systems lie actually the detection system of this system. So in case of energy dispersive XRF, the detector detect the energy of the fluorescence, and then we get the spectrum. Whereas in case of wavelength dispersive XRF, the wavelength of the fluorescence X-ray actually resolved by analyzing crystal, and detector basically detect the length of those waves. So for energy dispersive XRF, this instrumentation actually very compact and small and easy to maintain. Whereas for the wavelength dispersive XRF, it is slightly bigger, but it provides higher resolution and low detection limits, especially for lighter element. You can see for energy dispersive XRF, the lowest detection we could achieve is 1 ppm. However, in case of wavelength dispersive XRF, this could be 1 order higher, 1 order lower, that is 0.1 ppm. But in this presentation, I will only focus on the energy dispersive XRF. Okay, here is the basic component of energy dispersive XRF. So we have a X-ray tube. So when X-ray tube generate X-ray, this X-ray hit the sample that generate the fluorescence, and detector detect the fluorescence, and then the fluorescence actually amplified by pre-amplification, and data is displaced in the processing unit. Okay, so there are several type of energy transition can be happen during the interaction between X-ray and the matter. So we noted this transition line with K alpha, K beta, L alpha, L beta, and so on. And to understand the meaning, so KLM basically tells the final resting shell of the electron, and the alpha, beta, gamma, those tells basically where those electrons came from. For example, in case of K alpha line or energy transition, so this electron actually coming from the L shell and then fill up the inner shell and the K shell. So since the electron resting in the K shell, we call it K, and since this electron is coming from the L shell, we call it alpha. So it's K alpha. Similarly, for K beta, so electron is coming for the M shell and landing at the K shell, and also for the L alpha and L beta. Okay, so this energy transaction also we can calculate in case of any material. So here is an example of iron exposed to the X-ray, and iron generate K alpha line or K alpha fluorescence. And the wavelength of this fluorescence is measured as 0.194 using simple equation, that is E equal to h mu. We can easily calculate the energy of this wavelength. So when you put the value for the Planck constant and the velocity of the light and the wavelength of this fluorescence, you can easily find this energy is 6.4. So that's the characteristic of iron material. If you like to check this energy, there are many periodic table. You can find out easily. So here I got one from the Booker, and you can see here is the iron. And if I zoom out, so you can see the iron K alpha is a 6.4, exactly same what we got. And also iron L alpha energy is 0.705. Okay. So if we see the spectrum for that sample, we can easily see this is the iron K alpha, and this is the iron K beta. So these are the characteristics of this X-ray. And one thing you can note that the intensity is different, and I will come to this how we know and how we understand the intensity difference and how we got the quantitative result from this intensity. And beside the characteristic X-ray, you may also see here other peaks, and this peak actually from the source, since we use rhodium source as an X-ray, and these are the artifacts, and you will see this kind of artifact in XRF spectrum, and I will explain each of these in the later section of my talk. Okay. So here's the energy and atomic number relationships. In 1913, Mosley developed a relationship between the energy of the X-ray fluorescence with the atomic number. And the C1 and C2 are the constant, and the G is the atomic number. And if you see in the graph, as atomic number of atom increase, the energy also energy of the fluorescence also increase. So that's the relationship for the different energy transaction line, like K alpha, K beta, L beta, M alpha, and L alpha. And another thing to be noted that the fluorescence yield actually not the same for each transaction. So for K, you can see with the atomic number, here is the relationship with the atomic number, and for L and M also different relationship. And if you see the ratio between the fluorescence yield of K alpha to L alpha is like almost 80 to 20. Okay, so for EDX 7000 series, we can see that detection limit for different element. This different color indicate the detection limit for this element. Okay, actually one thing I miss here. So if you look at the fluorescent yield for the lighter element, the fluorescent yield actually very low. But as atomic number increase, the fluorescent yield actually increase. For the lighter element, it is very difficult to get the correct quantitative information from XRF. That is one of the limitations of XRF. And for this reason, you can see for lighter element, So this lower detection limit could be like 10% atomic percentage. And as you go through the table, you will see for the heavier atom, we can achieve 0.1 ppm level. And this table actually applicable for EDX 7000 series and EDX 8000 series from Shimazu. Okay, there are several factors could contribute for the degree of fluorescence. So one of the things is the thickness of your sample and density of your sample, and as well as the material of this sample. Because there is a penetration depth for X-ray depending on the sample material as well as for the density. So for an example, and if we use rhodium source with a 20 kilo electronic volt, the penetration depth of the X-ray for lead is the 25 micrometer, for iron is 200 micrometer, but in case of water, it can go up to 3 centimeters. So you can see the huge difference in the penetration depth. Okay, so how does a qualitative spectrum looks like? So here is an example for qualitative analysis. And you can see there's a bunch of different peaks from different elements. And if I just focus on 2 peaks, you may see each peak has corresponding energy. And this energy basically tells you which element present in your sample. That's the qualitative analysis. So from this one, we could see this first one represent the iron K alpha, and the second one represent the bromine K alpha. Sometimes these 2 peaks may overlap, but in this case, you can still see the different location of this peaks in case of lead L alpha and bismuth L alpha. And we could still identify lead and bismuth from this kind of overlap peak. But in some case, 2 peaks may superimpose on each other. You will see just 1 peak, but it may consist of 2 atom or 2 element. Maybe it may consist of lead L alpha and arsenic K alpha. So in this case, what you want to see, you have to look for the other lines, such as K beta lines for arsenic and the L beta line for lead, or other line like M alpha or M beta. If you find this line exists, then you can conclude that this 1 peak actually combined of these two peaks. And here is the potential artifact that I mentioned previously, that beside the characteristic peak, we may see other artifact from either source or different scattering. So in this case, since our X-ray source is rhodium, we will see the rhodium K alpha and rhodium K beta, because this peak actually scattered by the sample and they are not affected, and they don't lose any energy due to the relay scattering. And we're gonna easily identify this from the rhodium K alpha and this from rhodium K beta. But if they lost some energy due to the Compton scattering, this peak slightly shifted and in the lower energy level. And in case here we can see the rhodium Compton scattering for K beta, and here we can see the rhodium Compton scattering for K alpha. And another is this is same scattering if the quantum and Rayleigh scattering, also depending on the sample material. Because as you know that in case of quantum scattering, if the loosely bound electron is more, the X-ray could easily knock out this electron and lose energy. So in case of a lighter element, the quantum scattering actually pronounced. But for the heavier element, such as lead, the quantum scattering actually diminish. You cannot see any quantum scattering. But a relay scattering is very similar. And also we got some noise from the background in case of lighter element. Okay, so another artifact is escape peaks. So escape peak basically so when a photon absorb on the detector, detector could absorb and re-emit some fluorescence, and that fluorescent energy actually lost, and we could see this kind of escape peak, and this lost energy, basically the energy of that fluorescence emitted by the detector. So in case of silicon-based detector, the K alpha energy is 1.74, and if we see the iron K alpha peak is 6.4, since a 1.74 electron volt is lost, so we just subtract this 1.74 from the 6.4, that is K alpha for iron, and we could see the escape peak for iron at 4.66. And we also see other peaks like SUM peak, and in this picture you can see we have several other SUM peaks. So what does SUM peak mean? So SUM peaks basically when a photon is arrived at the detector at the same time, the detector measures the twice of the energy of the photon. So in case of iron, since iron K alpha energy is 6.4, the twice of this energy is 12.8, and we'll see one SUM peak from this iron. How about if a sample contains more than one element? In that case, we'll see combination of SUM peak and combination of escape peak. For example, here, so we'll see iron SUM peak and copper SUM peak, and there's combination SUM peak in this area. And similarly for escape peak, we say iron escape peak and the copper escape peak. Okay, so these are basically the artifacts, and there is another special type of artifact we sometimes observe, and this only happens if your sample is highly crystalline, and this is due to the diffraction from your crystal. And this lines looks very similar to XRF line. You can see the diffraction line here, and these are the XRF. And there is no certain rules to identify the position of these peaks. But there is a small trick to identify whether those are from diffraction lines. So that is, if you just rotate or you just displace your sample, that means you change this plane. So this diffraction light will move to another place. So it may move to here or other place. But the XRF peak should be at the same location. So if your peaks moves, you can easily identify these are from diffraction. Okay, so these are basically the all types of artifacts in the spectrum, and how we calculate the amount of element in your sample. So since you know the fluorescence yield for different line, actually different, even for different element, fluorescence yield is different. That means the E-scale for different element are not the same. Their E-scale is different. even though in the spectrum, you may see different intensity, but actually it tells a different concentration. Okay, for example, here, like a chromium, if it is scale from 1 to 200 ppm, for cadmium, it could be from 1 to 100 ppm. If similar element exists in a different material, like in plastic, their scale also different because for the scattering of the X-ray light and also the absorption. For here, you can see the scale is significantly larger than in the metal, chromium in metal. And similarly, if cadmium in metal and cadmium in plastic, the scale also different. So it is important to make your own scale for your material. So conventionally, we prepare the standard sample with different content of known sample and make a calibration curve. And from this calibration curve, we get a coefficient, and using this coefficient, we can calculate the amount of element in your unknown sample. However, in many cases, you cannot actually make a standard sample. In that case, we use fundamental parameter methods. And this method actually well-developed methods, and it utilizes physics to generate a spectrum, something like a standard sample. And this method can provide universal scale that can be used for any element in any material. So in briefly, how this method works. So this method basically generates several standard sample like a spectrum. And when you scan your sample, it's gonna look for the spectrum which is best fit for your spectrum. And once it finds the best fit, based on that calculation, it calculate or estimate the amount of this element in your material. Okay, so here's the basic component of ED-XRF is for the Simarjo 700 series. And we have X-ray source here. And in between X-ray source and colorimeter, we have a filter. So filter basically reduces the interfering line and also the background noise. So that increases the signal to noise ratio. And the colorimeter basically has a different hole that limit the exposure area. And here is our sample. So sometimes sample chamber also equipped with camera, and this camera helps to positioning the sample. And finally, the detector detect the energy of the photon. Okay, so here's the X-ray tube. So briefly, X-ray tube is a vacuum tube that contains a tungsten filament, and once we follow a current through it, it generates thermoelectron, and under a potential, so this electron actually travel through towards the target and hit this target. So in this case, it's a rhodium target. So once it's hit rhodium target, it generate fluorescence and or X-ray. Then this X-ray actually coming through the beryllium window. And this types of X-ray tube actually is very low efficient. It's efficient to generate X-ray is less than 1%. Most of the energy actually dissipated as a heat, like 99% of the sample. And here's the spectrum for the rhodium X-ray. And you can see the rhodium's characteristics peak here and some other here, so K alpha, K beta. And this spectrum also contains some continuous X-ray, and I will explain in my next slide what is the continuous X-ray. But before that, you can see the rhodium actually cover the lot of energy area. So that's a lower energy is useful to analyze lighter element, and for the higher energy is useful to analyze the heavier element. And another things for the rhodium is rarely the subject of analysis. Therefore, we use rhodium frequently in XRF system. And as I mentioned, in the rhodium spectrum, there is some continuous X-ray that is produced in that X spectrums. So this continuous spectrum also called breaking radiation. So when electron actually pass through the atom, some electron path actually influenced by the atomic radius and the surrounding electrons. And therefore it lost some energy as a continuous X-ray. Okay, so here's the filter in the system that we have at Emerald, that is Simarjo 7000 series. And I already mentioned the use for the filter. It basically reduce the intensity of interfering lines and background, hence it's improve the signal to noise ratio. And here's some example for the filters. Like for filter 2, can eliminate the rhodium L line. So in this spectrum is without filter. Once we use the filter, we could see the chlorine K alpha peak, but without using filter 2, we cannot see the chlorine alpha peak or chlorine beta peak. So filter 4 is used to subtract the background noise. So, and therefore increase the signal to noise ratio. So in this case, you can see easily the signal significantly increase when we use the filter 4. Similarly, for an example, filter 1 can eliminate the rhodium K line. And here, when we use the filter 1, we can easily see the cadmium K alpha, whereas without using this filter, we could not able to see a cadmium K alpha peak here because the strong signal from the rhodium K line. And there are several other optional hardware we can use in the XRF system. Since for the lighter element, it generates the X-ray fluorescence with a low energy. And our ambient contains oxygen, carbon dioxide, and other gases. Therefore, this gas could easily absorb this low energy fluorescence, and we could not see anything. And to identify this lighter element, so we should evacuate the ambient gases from our system. So two things we can use. One is we can use a helium atmosphere to fill up this chamber and remove the atmospheric gases from the chamber. And another thing, we can evacuate by a vacuum system. So if we look at an example, when we use, when we do measurement in air and under vacuum, in the lower energy level in air, we could not see anything because this energy actually absorbed by the environmental oxygen and carbon dioxide and other gases. But when we use the vacuum, we could easily see these peaks. But for the higher energy, it's slightly less affected as we go more in higher energy area. And in case of helium atmosphere, here is a comparison between helium and air, and with the relative intensity from different elements. And you can see as going to the higher element, our signal actually reaches to the 100% in the ER system. But if we use the helium, we can easily improve the lighter element signal to the 100% level. And if we just look at once element signal from sulfur, so here's the comparison in between ER and helium. If you can see for in case of ER, the signal actually significantly reduced due to the since the oxygen and other gases in atmosphere absorbs this energy. But when we remove those gases from the chamber, the signal actually significantly improved. So to analyze the lighter element, we should use either helium or a vacuum system. So in our MRL, we have the helium gas system equipped with our EBX XRF. Okay, so here shortly the sample preparation. In most cases, you may not need to prepare your sample. You can just use a plastic cup, and then in between two components of plastic cup, we usually place a plastic film that is alkaline made of some plastic, and then press it. So there's if you pour powder and liquid, it cannot penetrate through this plastic. And also we should place this plastic facing towards the X-ray source. And X-ray has very low absorption to the plastic, so most of the X-ray can going through the plastic layer and hit your sample. In case of solid sample, you can directly place your solid sample without doing any sample preparation. So this XRF contains several sample stages, so we can place up to 12 sample in our chamber, and we can analyze one by one. However, to improve the result quality, some preparation method frequently used. So in case of a solid material, if the surface is rough or is curved, the distance between the X-ray source and your sample may different. So that generate some error in your measurement. So, so best result you could achieve with a very flat surface without any curvature or any roughness. And another thing, if your surface has rough, if you have a rougher surface, for the lighter element, you will get more scattering from the rougher surface. And in case of powder, we can press the powder and make it into a pellet. Sometimes we use some binder like cellulose to bind all this powder together. So aim for this is to reduce the void in between the powder, so that reduce the dilution effect. Because if in case in loose powder, the distance between each particle may be different. So you will get a better result with this kind of approach. And if you want to get much better result, you have to use some fuse bead. So because even though you press your powder, it may contain different particle size that introduce some matrix effect, as well as some mineralogical effect. That means if your particle oriented in different direction and with a different pixelality, that introduce many scattering. However, in the fuse system, we we grinded the powder in fine particle and then mixed with lithium tetraborate and heated up very high temperatures such as like 900 to 1000 Celsius and to melt it and make it a glass. And in this case, we get rid of matrix effect or particle size effect, and you'll get more reproducible result. You can see the effort you can put to make preparation, the sample, cost, and quality of the result. In most cases, if you want quick result, you don't need to prepare your sample, but for the best result, you have to go through one of these sample preparation method. Okay, so here are some applications for the XRF. Like we have one chocolate sample and it is contaminated with a different matter. And we scan at a different area and label as A, B, C, D, and E. And when we get the XRF spectrum, we could say the spectrum looks different. That means each area may contains different element. So when we analyze, for example, area A, we get this element in that area, that's iron, chromium, nickel, manganese, and molybdenum. And with this, we can conclude that this foreign matter may consist of, for A is stainless steel, B probably copper wire, and C is lead, tin, and bronze, and zinc plated steel wire, etc. So for any surface, this method is very useful to identify any contamination with a foreign material. And another application with the XRF to calculate the thickness and composition of layer structure. So XRF utilize the density and other fundamental parameters to calculate the thickness. But one thing is that the different layers should contain different element. In case same element in different layer exist, in that case, we cannot actually calculate the thickness of the flame. So this example is nickel nickel plating on the copper substrate, and from the concentration of nickel, phosphorus, and lead, we can using the density and fundamental parameter, we can convert it to the thickness. It is a 1.8 micrometer. Okay, so with that, I'm thanking all of you to listening my talk. And if you have further question, you can contact me or my other colleague, Juan Lopez or Mauro Sardella, our MRL facility director. And just to remind you, we have next webinar on next Thursday at noon on electron microscopy for biological materials, given by Dr. Christian Fett. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mohammed. Very comprehensive review in this important technique. We have a few questions here. Not only that, we have also the attendees discussing among themselves, providing very good feedback here. First question is that what parameters determine the spatial resolution in XRF? Another attendee here is suggesting that the spatial resolution in XRF is heavily influenced by the beam size. You comment on that, please?
Yes, sure. So in this case, we use a different colorimeter. If you see the opening of this colorimeter, basically that determine the spatial resolution of XRF. This is generic XRF system. But in the market, there are some micron XRF. So they use optics to guide this X-ray light to focus in like in micron
Okay.
size area. Yes.
Okay. Another question is comparing the XRF with the SEM EDS. So is the energy resolution about the same for both techniques, XRF and EDS?
No, they are different. So basically, I have one slide for comparison chart, and this was already given by one of our staff member in her SEM talk. So the basic difference between SEM and XRF EDX are the source. So SEM EDX use electron source to excite the electron, but in XRF we use X-ray source. And if you just look at the comparison of the spectrum, so I have this graph. SEM EDX actually more sensitive for the lighter element, but for the heavier element, you can see the XRF is a more sensitive technique. And red color represent the ED SEM, and this line is for the ED XRF.
Okay, do you have an estimate for the magnitude of the energy loss due to Compton scattering? Does that loss change with the atomic number Z?
Actually, there are many factors affecting those loss. So it is difficult, but also depending on the density of the material and what types of material, like it is a metal or plastic, or the atomic number of a material. So all those factors combined to give those results. And fundamental parameter method utilize those physics to estimate. And I don't have any specific number for this. But from this graph, you can see the fluorescence yield without having, for different atomic number, maintain this relationship.
Okay. Next question is that how about if we use multiple filters to scan the sample for impurities?
Yeah,
can you combine the spectra, for example, if I understand the question?
Yes, so we can use multiple filters for the scan, but the more filter you use, you will lose some intensity and the sensitivity, because filter cut off some of the X-ray fluorescence as well. X-ray, like not fluorescence, like excess source energy. So you get less energy to excite your sample. But yes, we can use multiple filters. Frequently, we use this three filter combination to do any scan.
Okay. How about running XRF in liquids? Can you give more detail? Does the spectra, how the spectra is different if the sample was solid?
Yes. So in liquid, since the penetration depth for the X-ray actually much higher than in solid. Also in liquid, we may not see any particle scattering, but in solid, we may see some particle scattering. And yeah, so I don't have any direct comparison between solid and liquid sample, but it should be slightly different between solid and liquid.
Okay. How about the comparison between us running the instrument under helium or vacuum? I think you showed like data comparing like in air and with helium, but do you have anything comparing like vacuum versus helium?
I don't have that graph, but for helium, you can measure up to like sodium atom. And if you want to go beyond sodium, you have to use vacuum system. Because beyond sodium, that energy actually very low. And even though we use helium, we don't get enough fluorescence energy to be detected by the by the detector. So that's the one of the limitation for helium use and in XRF.
Okay, now back to the Compton scattering. Could the Compton scattering be used or be beneficial to detect lighter elements?
Compton scattering, we can use Compton scattering to detect, sometimes we detect the thickness of the polymer based on this background Compton scattering. But Compton scattering only from the source, so that we cannot actually identify element for the lighter element. But yes, since the Compton scattering is higher in lighter element, we can use as what is the thickness of this layer.
Okay. Final question here is that, can you go back to that slide where you showed how to calculate the film thickness? Can you explain again that he's asking, how did you actually get that number?
Okay, so this number,
what's the principle involved here then?
Yeah, so this basically use the fundamental parameter to calculate this number. So this basically count for the density and also the composition of this layer. And since we know the concentration of each element, you can easily convert it using the concentration to the thickness, using the density and the area of the thickness, using this very basic equation.
Okay. So if you could show again the last slide, Mohammed, please.
Which one?
If anyone, the last one with your picture, with photograph there, with your contact.
Yes, sure.
Thank you very much. Anything else to add, Mohammed?
No, I think, yeah, if someone have any other question, please contact me and I'm happy to answer any question.
Okay, thank you very much again. The video of this presentation will be available within a couple of days, maybe if not tomorrow, maybe Monday on our YouTube channel. Please check that. Great resource for teaching, training students. We're getting a lot of thank you to you, Mohammed, for this great talk. Again, don't forget.
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, I thank to everyone for listening my talk and the question. Yeah.
And don't forget that next week you have a big presentation coming up. That's in electron microscopy of biological materials. We have Dr. Kristen Flatt, which is a specialist in neuroscience. She is the one with Luan Miller leading our effort to expand our bio capabilities in the MRL. We're already doing a lot of bio work, bioservice work. We do cryo electron microscopy as well. But we have just ordered and we are going to receive a dedicated cryo electron microscopy TEM system, Glacier system come up in the fall, where our capabilities in that area will significantly improve. So don't miss the talk of Kristen. It's a hot topic, cryo TM, Nobel Prize a few years ago. We'll hope to see you guys again Thursday next week. Again, I hope you guys stay safe. Enjoy your summer. Please come back to use our instruments. Let us know if you have any questions. Thanks again and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.